Namaste. Welcome again to the Bhagavad Gita as it is. My name is Janapati Das, and I'd like to offer my respects to you. Thank you very much for tuning in as we are approaching close to Janmashtami, the appearance day of Sri Krishna. Let's take this opportunity to encourage you to go back and watch Krishna and Balaram stories from my Krishna book series that's on my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so. Feel free to comment, like, and share the items on that. And of course, I've done through part of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, working through that. Hopefully, if I'm around on the planet for a few more decades, I can get to some other scriptures like the Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Upanishad or some things like that. So let me offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, Jagadguru Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, and pray for his continued mercy upon this wretched soul, and to my grandfather, spiritual master A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, I offer my respectful obeisances. Thank you very much, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, for translating the Bhagavad Gita and commenting on it that we have been using. We'll start with some hearing and chanting of Krishna's names, which is the most wonderful form of benediction for humanity that we can engage in, so please join along. Namo Swarupananda Paramam Saranam Gola Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Pristayate Namo Swarupananda Paramam Saranam Gola Karuna Swarupaya Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gauranga Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gauranga Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai Shri Prabhupada. So, we are continuing with our conversation between Krishna and Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And we had left off last time in chapter 2, text 60. Just as a recap, the previous verse, we're talking about the power. Krishna was explaining to Arjuna how powerful and strong the senses, our material senses are, impetuous and strong, right? They forcefully carry away the mind of even the man of discrimination. So we're talking about that in the case of renunciation, of trying to go off to the forest, like Arjuna wanted to do, go off to the forest and be a yogi, Krishna was saying this is very difficult. And this was a time when, we're talking about Arjuna here. Arjuna was a really extremely mentally strong, physically strong warrior of just incredible caliber. This time the warriors were amazing, because this was not quite Kali Yuga yet. This was at the border of the previous Yuga, Dwarpana, I think it is, Dwarpana Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And Krishna was saying, even so, somebody who has discrimination and knows the difference between what the mind does and how the senses work can be carried away. And he cited the example of the great sage Vishvamirita, or Bhaktivedanta did, who was a really amazing sage. So, the idea of being a renunciate, there is this kind of idea of like the person in the loincloth. And if you go to India today, you'll find plenty of people who are trying to do these kinds of things. But the conclusion of what real renunciation is not what people think it is, because you can be doing all the right things, eating very little, living off nothing, meditating in the forest, and still your mind could be causing you problems. And Krishna cites that of a person who is withholding their senses, but their mind is still engaged in the process, is certainly a pretender. We'll get to that verse. So starting from text 61, Tani Sarvani Shamyaya Yukta Ashita Mat Paraha Vashehi Yashindriyani Tasya Prajna Pratishtita. I think that's the word. Indrayani has to do with the senses. I always remember because it reminds me of Lord Indra. Indrayani is the senses, right? Tani, those senses. Sarvani, all. Samyaya, keeping under control. Yukta, being engaged. Yukta is that word that has to do with like engaging something or connecting into Krishna consciousness. Ashita, being so situated. Matpara, in a relationship with me. Vashe, in full subjugation. He, certainly, Yashya, one whose Indriyani, senses. Tasha, his. Prajna, consciousness. Pratishtita, fixed. Shtita, so we have this sort of stita, which means steady. So this is also that word that's in there. Translation, one who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So that's a very amazing verse. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So we had been talking about the Ashtanga process of the previous age, where you'd have pratyahara, which is to withdraw the senses, but the next is dhyana, is to focus the senses upon something particular. And then as we go through those Ashtanga processes to Dhyan, we actually focus the senses, focus the mind on Krishna. And so this is what we're coming to here is that basically to restrain your senses and fix your consciousness upon Krishna, as me, says upon me, is a man who known as a man of steady intelligence. So that's real intelligence. We have a lot of kinds of intelligence in this world where people say this person is so intelligent, but the real intelligence is actually, and I'm going to focus, there we go. See Krishna Balaram back there. Real intelligence is fixing your consciousness, fixating upon Krishna and not upon yourself. That the highest conception, this is the purport, that the highest conception of yoga perfection is Krishna consciousness, is clearly explained in this verse. Let's read that again. That the highest conception of yoga perfection is Krishna consciousness is clearly explained in this verse. Now, people don't really understand like what yoga perfection really means. A lot of people think of yoga as hatha yoga or the asanas. You know, you go to hot yoga, you go to core power yoga, you go to Bikram yoga, you go to goat yoga, beer yoga, whatever yoga that's going on at the gym. Those kind of exercises that you do, that is a small little branch of the yoga, the conception of yoga, what real yoga really means. And here, and actually, the hatha yoga was a part of the branch that would help you elevate your consciousness, you know, because you do your body, you twist out all the, you know, if your body is bothering you, I mean, we know this, if your body is bothering you and you're not able to focus your mind, because you would do asanas, because asanas would make your body strong so that you could use your body in service of Krishna, calms the body down, improves the health by the circulation of blood. So you know, it's not that I'm saying that hatha yoga is not a good thing. I love doing yoga. My wife teaches yoga. I like taking the class. I've always liked doing yoga, asanas. But it's easy to lose the plot. Like I'm doing yoga, right? You know, a lot of people they do yoga to become a yoga master and do workshops and, you know, attract beautiful women or men to them because they're very like, you know, I'm a yogi. And they read all these texts and stuff, and they don't really have any spiritual masters, so they just accumulate a bunch of knowledge and give off workshops, and they're very good at doing twisties and standing on their head and whatnot. And this is what Bhaktivedanta Swami is saying here, that the conception of yoga perfection is Krishna consciousness. And unless one is Krishna consciousness, it's not at all possible to control the senses. And actually, that's not the purpose of these yogis a lot of times anyways, because they may think, oh, this is, you know, my senses are very controlled, but, you know, very charismatic people attract people. So it's like, you know, if you're very charismatic and you're twisting and you're putting people in poses, it becomes a sexual thing. And this is unfortunately what's happened with yoga. And I don't really blame a lot of like Christians when they're like, you know, yoga. You know, it's like they don't really, because a lot of people don't really understand the purpose of yoga. As cited above, the great sage Durvasha Muni picked a quarrel with Maharaj Ambarisha. So this is a story out of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's very interesting because Muni, we've read before, is this great sage, supposed to be a great sage. So Durvasha Muni was a great sage. He picked a quarrel with Maharaj Ambarisha, so the king. So you think, okay, in the processes of the system, if you have a saint or a great Muni, like Narada Muni or one, you know, any Muni, they come in the presence of the Kshatriyas, the kings, and the kings offer their respects to these great sages because they're sages. They're highly enlightened. But he in this story, I don't see if it will tell what actually happened, but I can tell you what happened. Anyway, there was a sort of an incident with a fasting time that I'm not going to go into too much, that Ambarisha, Maharaja Ambarisha was trying to fast, and he had to stop fasting at a certain point, but there was some problems with like Durvasa Muni not getting his proper food or whatever at the right time because Maharaja Ambarisha had made, there was some error that had happened, not from Maharaja Ambarisha, but from some other situation. So he picked a quarrel with Maharaja Ambarisha, and Durvasa Muni unnecessarily became angry out of pride and therefore could not check his senses. On the other hand, the king, although not as powerful a yogi as the sage, but a devotee of the Lord, silently tolerated the sage's injustices and thereby emerged victorious. The king was able to control his senses because of the following qualifications, as mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, yeah, you have this great sage who created an offense against a great devotee, Maharaja Ambarisha, who was not thinking of himself as a great devotee, but the Muni himself kind of thought, I'm a sage and people need to worship me, and so therefore he became offensive, and there was a situation where there was a curse, and the curse came back on Durvasa Muni because of creating the offense, and the only thing that Durvasa Muni could do in the end was surrender to Maharaja Ambarisha and offer his respects, but he could, this is a devotee's attitude is not becoming offended by things that people say or do to you, because you feel that as a great devotee. You don't feel like a great devotee. You feel lower than the straw on the street. So if people are criticizing you or, making criticisms of you, it's whatever. It's like, and but that doesn't mean that that's acceptable, because Krishna does not tolerate that when their great devotees are being creating offenses. So when people are making offenses towards devotees, we would stand up for that. We would stand up for that, but not for ourselves. That's the point. So here's in Sanskrit: Savai manaha Krishna padavad vindayor vishchami vaikuntha guna nu varnane kara kare mardira marjana dishu shrutim chakaracha rucha sat kato daye mukunda lingalaya dashane dushao tad brita gatlap spase nga sangamam griham cha tadpada saroja sarabe shrimat tulasya rashana tad aripite. It's a long verse. Padal hare kishetula padan nusharpane shiro hirikesha pada birabandane kamam cha dashe natu kama kamaya ato ayato yatot tama shloka jashraya rati. The translation from this Srimad Bhagavatam verse: King Ambarisha fixed his mind upon the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, engaged his words in describing the abode of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing the pastimes of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the form of the Lord, his body in touching the body of the devotee, his nostrils in smelling the flavor of the flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulasi leaves offered to him Krishna, his legs in traveling to the holy place where his temple is situated, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in fulfilling the desires of the Lord. So all these qualifications made him fit to become a Madhparaha devotee of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 4th chapter, 18th to 20th verse. So once again, Madhpara in a relationship with Krishna. So completely engaged in the 9 devotional processes of devotional service. So those again, and I'll put them down in the comments, but they're hearing, remembering, offering the, what's the word I'm thinking? Offering the respect to the the deity in the temple. So those are just a few of them, having a loving relationship with Krishna. There are 9 processes of devotional service. So even in the hearing about Krishna's names, so like this hearing the stories of the Srimad Bhagavatam or Krishna book, that is a process of devotional service in practice. So it's very wonderful. King Ambarisha was a great devotee because he spent his whole life doing things in Krishna consciousness. Everything he was about Krishna. It was like he would offer the flowers to Krishna. He would offer tulsi and smell the tulsi using the smelling senses. So we have these senses, and we have our mind, and the mind a lot of times will be agitated because of the senses that are agitated as well. So the mind will try to be directing to engage in the material world in the service of our own pleasure through our senses. Like that looks good to eat, ice cream. I don't think about Krishna, I just eat it, that's good. Or I'm going to have this and have that, and my mind's going, yeah, ice cream's going to sound good. But the intelligence thinking about Krishna is like, wow, there's some Krishna's energy that he gave us the opportunity that we were going to eat. We'll eat it, but we think about Krishna. Please, dear Krishna, please accept this ice cream at your lotus feet. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. And you offer that, but thinking about Krishna. And then once that's been done, and you're thinking about Krishna, the ice cream, the energy of the ice cream, the material energy, becomes spiritualized. It becomes prasadam. It becomes prasad. It becomes Lord's mercy. Krishna has touched Krishna. Because, it's all emanating from Krishna. But once we bring it back into remembrance of Krishna, it's like the analogy is like taking an iron rod, and the iron rod is iron, but you put it in fire, and it becomes just like the quality of fire. So similarly, when we offer a prasadam to Krishna, then it becomes spiritualized. Similarly, if we've, using our ears and we're listening to nonsensical music for our own pleasure, we can hear chanting of Krishna's names, which is not different than Krishna, going through our ears, right? Focusing our mind upon it. So these are ways by which we can, people say, how do you do that? How do you serve Krishna? By basically using your intelligence to utilize your mind, finding out ways to redirect your senses and your consciousness into the service of your spiritual master in Krishna. So the word matparaha is most significant in this connection. How can one become a matparaha? Is described in the life of Maharaj Ambarisha. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, a great scholar and acharya in the line of Marapara, remarks, Mad Bhakti Prabhavena Sarvendriya Vijaya Purvika Svatma Drishti Shulabeti Babaha. The senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. So the senses are impetuous, and they're completely dictating. They'll go wild, and if the mind is like, okay, whatever, just, it's like, let's go. The only way you can do it is to get a higher taste that we've been talking about. It's like, I surrender you, Krishna. Everything I do for Krishna. And this is the only way that the senses become trained, because otherwise we're just like, okay, I'm not going to eat ice cream. I'm not going to listen to nonsensical music. I'm not going to, and Arjuna was thinking this, I'm not going to go fight in the battle. I'm not going to enjoy the kingdom. I'm going to go live out in the forest, and I'm going to be a yogi, and I'm going to, this is what people think about when they think about renunciation. They think about that somehow there's this, these, whatever, yogis and Buddhists that are like, they're renunciating everything, all the senses, everything like that. But you can't really do that, because by nature we're a living entity, and we're going to be engaging in something. Even if you're trying to renounce something, what are you renouncing it for? Because you don't want to become attached to it, so therefore it still becomes a sense gratification, something that you want to do. And this is what one of the arguments that was brought up against Arjuna was that you're going to still have to act, and you're still acting for your own pleasure instead of my pleasure. That's the difference. So you can be doing the same thing in the material world, but one is to do for the pleasure of Krishna, matpada, in a relationship with Krishna. The other is to ignore that relationship and have a relationship with Maya Devi, the external energy of Krishna. Krishna, right? The material goddess who is there to torment you. Also, the example of fire is sometimes given as small flames burn everything up within the room. Similarly, Lord Vishnu, situated in the heart of the yogi, burns up all kinds of impurities. The Yoga Sutra also prescribes meditation on Vishnu and not meditation on the void. The so-called yogis who meditate on something which is not the Vishnu form simply waste their time in a vain search after some phantasmagoria. We have to be Krishna conscious, devoted to the personality of Godhead. This is the real aim. This is the aim of the real yoga. And the problem is that many impersonalism and Buddhism, nihilism, right, is different kinds of impersonalism. You have the void, which they think of as nirvana. You become this, void, and there is no actual relationship because you don't really exist. You're just part of this void, and you are void, or if you're in the personalist, you are that. But the difference is with the personalist, the bhakta, is that he understands that there is a relationship. There's continuously a relationship, and that the eternal relationship we have is the Jivatma to the Paramatma, or Krishna to the Jivatma. And this is the real yoga. This is the connection. We are reconnecting our relationship, which is otherwise you're just you have nothing to stand on, really. It's just this sort of like mental gymnastics that you try to go through to make yourself believe that you are actually the void or whatever. It doesn't make any sense. So here we go. More interesting verses going on here. Text 62. Dayayatu vishana pumshaha sangashteshu pajate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat kroda bijayate dhyayata while contemplating vishayan sense objects, pumsha the person, shangaha attachment, teshu in the sense objects, upajayate develops, sangat attachment, sanjayate develops, kamaha desire, kamat from desire, krodaha anger, abhijate becomes manifest. So a key verse, as many verses, actually all the verses are key, but there are some that you may recognize. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So here we go. This is a very key point. And this is applicable in everything that you can see around you while contemplating the objects of the senses. So we're present within our body as Jivatma, and we are observing the material world through our senses, right? And so we are trying to find some kind of satisfaction or happiness, which is the natural state of the Jivatma, but it is normally in a relationship with Krishna, but we are trying to find it through the material energy, perverted for our own enjoyment as a sort of proxy Krishna. And we contemplate these objects of the senses, the things we see. Oh, there's ice cream. Oh, look at that beautiful girl, my God. And you start thinking about that, All right, let's take that example, the girl. All right, if you're in a male body, or if it's a boy in a female body, you're contemplating that through your eyes, and a person develops attachment for them. Okay, so then you become attached to the idea of enjoying this body of this person, and then from such attachment, lust develops. Now it's interesting because lust is the Sanskrit word is kamaha, desire. So that is a desire, right? It is a desire of the living entity to have some kind of satisfaction or happiness. But it also is a burning desire to own and control things. So we think of lust in the English language as like a sexual sort of attraction or burning attraction, which is partially true. But this idea of desire is any kind of desire through the objects of the senses. We could be hearing, God, I want to hear that song from SoundCloud, and you're thinking about that song all day, and you want to go get off and go on the radio and play it. Or if you want to, you're like, what's that smell? You're like, you want to smell that thing, or what, I want to taste it. It's all the things through the senses. We become attached, and from the attached, it becomes ultimately anger, krodha. So the burning desire to get things, agitates the mode of passion in us. And so that mode of passion is oftentimes connected, not often, but all the time, connected to fighting, anger, sexual procreation, just drive. You see these people who get in fights, or UFC fighters. It's a mode of passion, right? Because they're just, and then they get hit in a way, and it doesn't feel good, so then it gets them more angry. So they're cultivating this mode of anger. Or another good example of, like, maybe the guy who doesn't get a lot of dates, and he is just contemplating these beautiful women, and he's rejected one after another because he's kind of ugly or physically, right? And then he just gets really, really, really more and more angry, and he's just online making sexist statements about women, or misogynistic, comments, or even to the worst verse of raping women or killing, being a serial killer. And you see these kind of things happen, and this all comes from here. You can actually take any situation in the material world and apply this philosophy to it, and you can see politics, people contemplating the political world, and getting attached to it, getting aggravated by it, and just wanting to control and change things and go out and protest, and then they're just angry, and they're just like, so then we get to the next verse, which I will, because that's this verse kind of continues into how contemplating the objects of the senses in the material world, how it goes out here. So the purport by His Divine Grace: one who is not in Krishna who is not Krishna conscious is subject to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. So the gathering, the focusing your consciousness and focusing your senses, your mind upon the sense objects in the material sense is developing these things. But when you focus it on Krishna is a higher taste. So the other things are not so attractive to you anymore. It's like, we say this thing about, I think it was Sri Yamanujacharya, who used to be attracted heavily to sex, but he applied his life in Krishna consciousness, and found that Krishna consciousness was so much more attractive that he was repulsed by the idea of sexual attraction, because he had no more attraction to them. And so we can see this as a practical experience, as our spiritual master will instruct us to chant Krishna's names and apply certain things in our life. And if we apply things in our life nicely, then we become attracted to those processes, and we find that the other things are not as attractive anymore, so we want to do more in Krishna consciousness. And this is a drawing in of Krishna, drawing us in, because And we find that this is a very higher taste and very attractive. So, you're subject to, if you don't focus on Krishna, you're going to be subject to trying to find that happiness through your material. There's plenty in the material world that appears to be very attractive, but the senses require real engagements, and if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. The power of the material energy in Maya Devi is so strong. It's like being in an ocean in a riptide. We've seen the examples here over and over again. Wind, the wind, more powerful than the wind is our mind, is more powerful than the wind, and we have to be engaged because we are active. This is another point in the concept of like Buddhism and whatnot, kind of with the idea that there is no self, right? And so if there's no self, then we are really all just a void, then there's no point in trying to control anything. We just, or even do anything for that matter. But we are a jivatma, and we have to engage. And Krishna was making this point that you will have to engage. Real renunciation is engaging what is already going to be engaging in something in the service of Krishna instead of in the service of materialism. And so, if we do not take our consciousness and apply it upon Krishna, we will be drawn away into trying to find that happiness in materialism. And that's exactly what the material world is all about. People just overly trying to just go from left to right to forward to back to just do whatever they can manipulate. And it's amazing to me because it's such a destructive attitude, and people are wondering why there's so much conflict and hatred in this world, why there's so much environmental degradism, why. I mean, it's a really hedonistic. The hedonistic lifestyle is a tragic situation because, one, it's in complete ignorance of who we really are, and two, it's completely destroying everything around us and destroying our relationships, destroying, bringing about hatred and war. But we need to have some kind of we are seeking Krishna, really. That's what we're seeking, but we don't know where to find it, and we just keep looking at wherever the material world, and Maya Devi indicates, oh yeah, how about that, how about that, how about this, and we engage our consciousness, and we become attached to it, and we get angry because either it doesn't satisfy us or we don't get it, and then therefore we go into this cycle again. We try to keep finding things. And we'll read more about this second part of this 2-verse connection here. Continuing on the purport, in the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects. So we see this happening, actually, even in the demigods. The Lord Brahma became attracted to his daughter when he created his daughter, and he became sexually attracted to her. Lord Shiva, it happened. Lord Indra happened quite a bit. Demigods, that happens all the time, right? To say nothing of other demigods. Okay, subjected to influence, and the only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence, I like that, puzzle, is to become Krishna conscious. So it is a puzzle. We're trying to figure it out, but it's a maze, with no exit except for Krishna. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed for the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. There's a lot of stories, actually, of great saintly kings who there was another one, maybe it's in here too, agitating their husband for sense pleasure, and then great demons are born. When Haridas Thakur was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi, but Haridas, easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. Yeah, it's a great story of Haridas Thakur and the prostitute. The Brahmana, the Brahmana and the Muslim magistrate were colluding to try to get rid of Haridas. And they were going to ruin his reputation by sending a beautiful prostitute. And Haridas Thakur, it was like, he just welcomed the prostitute to sit down. And he said, "I'm sorry, please forgive me. I haven't finished my rounds yet. I will grant your desire." And that's such a great story because, the prostitute's thinking, "Oh, he's going to grant my desire and have sexual union with me," But Haridas Thakur was understanding that everything. He knew why the prostitute had been sent, and out of total compassion for the Jivatma in that body of that prostitute, he decided he was going to save her, and he grant her desire, which is really Krishna. That's the real desire, is Krishna. It's Krishna's desire. Everybody's desire is Krishna, but they don't understand that a lot of times because they're completely bewildered by material energy and their own desires. He said, "I will save you." In the end, he said, "I was going to leave, but I decided to stay to save you." And so every day he would tell her to come back, and she would sit and she would wait. It was like 3 days or something. Then she started offering her respects to the Tulsi plant. When she would come in, she would offer respects to Haridas Thakur. She would hear him chanting, and her heart became purified to the point of understanding, having an understanding, and she confessed and surrendered to Haridas. Such a beautiful story, that story of Haridas Thakur and the prostitute. So, here you have great demigods who are becoming agitated, and this great devotee of Krishna, Haridas Thakur, who doesn't, because he was completely devoted to Krishna. And this is the point. As illustrated in the above-mentioned verse of Sri Yamanujacharya, a sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. That is the secret of success. One who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail. For the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. Great verse. So this is a point that Krishna is bringing to Arjuna, that you may be a great devotee, but you will not be able to withstand the material and material power. Even the great Bharat, King Bharat, who was a great devotee, and is named after the Bharat Varsa, the great king lineage of kings, right? And he went off to the forest to meditate at the end of his life and became attached to a deer. He became attached to taking care of this deer, and he could only think of him. And so in this case, it wasn't really sex issue, but it was the focus on another living entity, of the deer. And he became a deer in his next life, and he realized what mistake he had made. So he was a great devotee, a great yogi, So, continuing on, text 63. Oh, read the verse. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Krodad bhavati samayoha, samohat smriti vibramaha, smriti brahma shad buddhi nasho, buddhi nashat prana shanti. Krodhat, from anger, bhavati, takes place. Samoha, perfect illusion. Samohat, from illusion. Smriti, of memory. Vibhavaha, bewilderment. Smriti brahmashat, after bewilderment of memory. Buddhi nashaha, loss of intelligence. Buddhi nashat, from loss of intelligence. Prana shayati, falls down. Translation. So this is the second half of that verse. From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. From memory, when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So we can see the line. I'm just going to read those two verses together because they're kind of like, they should be read together as one verse. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. From when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So you can see that this line of things that happen by contemplating the objects of the senses, it leads to an ultimately reincarnation back into the material pool, falling down, forgetting who we really are. And this is, we can see the things. We get angry, we get deluded, our memory is bewildered. People see red when they get really angry, because of their contemplating. They may be contemplating a situation where their spouse cheated on them, and then in the end they forget, and their intelligence gets lost, and they end up killing that person because they see red, right? So, great verse, and I would contemplate. I think people should just put it on their wall and remind themselves about, because this happens to all of us, but in different degrees. But this is the nature, and maybe a picture of Krishna next to it. Like, okay, focus on Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna is the answer of everything. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects, and as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain to the perfect stage of renunciation. That's a great line. And once again, Arjuna wanting to go off to the forest, and Krishna saying that this is not going to lead to what you think it's going to lead to. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, fight. This is your renunciation. This is your offering. This is your service. This is, it's like, what? Really? Fighting in a war against a bunch of people with, shooting people full of arrows? Yes. This is what Krishna wants Arjuna to do. And it's doing it because of Krishna. It's thinking about Krishna. I'm going to fight this war for Krishna. I'm going to do so this is what I'm going to do for Krishna. I'm going to, offer my food to Krishna. I'm going to think about Krishna. I'm going to do my japa and chant Krishna's name. I'm going to tell people about Krishna. I'm going to help people in the material world come to the point of understanding Krishna. So this is a really wonderful thing. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. So many things in the material world that Krishna gives us. Says, okay, just offer me a fruit, a flower, a leaf. In this case, he's telling Arjuna, your flower is your fighting ability. Use your abilities, use your intelligence, use your body, use your mind, use the items that you have, your money in the service of Krishna. And with the consciousness of love and devotion. Because we know that Krishna, it's all Krishna's anyways. Krishna just wants the love. He wants our love. He wants our love and devotion. On the other, okay. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord or the absolute being impersonal cannot eat, whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables. A devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and that he eats all that is offered to him in devotion. So after offering good eatables to the Lord devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. And the prasadam is the same as the Krishna. So when we offer Krishna love and devotion, the foods that we are going to eat, we should honor Mahaprasadam. And there's another prayer in there, I have to pull it up, but a prasadam prayer, right? That people will say oftentimes before eating the prasadam. And Bhaktivedanta, I saw a video recently of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and how he would honor prasadam. He, we don't really honor our foods, but because it is non-different than Krishna, when we're taking that food into our heart, it's also a very important point that many times people mentally cannot understand, they cannot see, maybe because of where they are spiritually, the absolute truth. But the power of prasadam is extremely, being non-different than Krishna. The power of Krishna's names, the power of prasadam. Everybody likes to eat. So, you can offer your food, you can offer your cookies that you make to Krishna and then take them to your co-workers. And they may be complete atheists, but you give them prasadam. It's like, Krishna is the great trickster, he has many ways of helping people come back to him, even if they don't really want to. They give them the seed. So here it's saying that, the devotee knows that Krishna has a mouth and he can take Krishna and he can eat food and he can do things with multiple senses. So it's not like, even with his eyes, he can eat through his eyes. We can't do that. So after the eatables of the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. Thus everything becomes spiritualized and there is no danger of a downfall. The devotee takes prasadam and Krishna consciousness, whereas a non-devotee rejects it as material. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation, and for this reason a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to his not having support in devotional service. So we have time for a quick one more verse. Raga dvesha vimuktaishtu vishayan indriyaish chalan atma vashar vidye yatma prasadam adi gachati. Raga, attachment. Dvesha, detachment. And there's a dve, which means to divide. It comes the same word, divide into two. Vimuktyai, by one who has been free from such things. Tu, but. Vishayan, sense objects. Indriyai, by the senses. Charan, acting. Atma vashyai, one who has control over. Vijayatma, one who follows the regulated freedom. Prasadam, the mercy of the Lord. Adigachati, attains. Translation: one who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment and aversion. That's a great verse. I'm going to read that again. One who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment and aversion. Excuse me. And, the regulated principles of freedom, let that sit for a little bit. That's an amazing thing. Because we think of things in the material world of the freedom to do whatever you want to do. The free of being caught in hang-ups. Since the 60s, it was been like this. Get free from the hang-ups. If you want to fuck whoever you want to fuck. It's like eat whatever you want to eat, do whatever you want to do. But here, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna that unlimited, unregulated sense desires, sense is not freedom, is actually bondage, because it binds us to the material world, the attachment to the material world, and in this attachment from the contemplation of the objects of the senses and engaging into it and falling down into the material pool, being reincarnated. The real freedom is to say, no, I want to detach myself from the material conception of life, from my own pleasure materially, by unregulated sense desires, to applying those desires upon Krishna. I want to do this, I want to offer this food to Krishna and eat the prasadam afterwards. I want to listen to the words of my spiritual master and apply those in my life. I want to hear the chanting of Krishna's names and say them out of my mouth. I want to take the tulsi from my tulsi and offer it to Krishna. I want to use my intelligence to help people spiritually understand. This is a real freedom, the regulated freedom. So in the sense that you are regulating your senses. So instead of doing those things that I would normally do in the material world, I say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to apply this in my service to Krishna consciousness. Now, initially, you may come into the process of hearing and chanting, and just by the process of detaching yourself from, I'm going to go out to the club today, and like I normally do, and go party and drink, I'm going to go to this kirtan just this one day, and I might still be eating meat and doing sex and whatever with anybody and whatever, drugs and whatnot. But I decided to make that sacrifice by hearing. That seed is already planted. It'll go into our heart, and then we'll say, oh, maybe not the rest of our lifetime. You may never do that again, but it will still be there. And it's said in the Bhagavad Gita, but we've read it already, that the little bit of progress is not lost, whereas other things that we do in the material world is lost. So this is a great verse. It will help us attain real freedom from the attachment and aversion. Like that, happiness and distress. You're like, you've attached yourself. You've contemplated about that beautiful girl. You've gotten that beautiful girl, and you find out, I really don't like that usually. Or that beautiful girl cheats on me. Or that beautiful girl gets large and fat, and we want to find another beautiful girl. We become averted. We have an aversion eventually to that attachment. And you can see this through many, many material things, of which promises through Maya Devi, the idea of that real satisfaction and happiness that we get from our relationship with Krishna, by continuously pumping these things out, and we continuously jump on the bandwagon and are attached, and we are averted, and we are attached, and we are averted. And that is the real bondage. It's not a freedom, it's a bondage. The freedom is actually saying, well, actually no, I'm going to attach on this because this is a real freedom. The freedom is to leave the material world and to go back to Krishna, to reinstate our relationship with Krishna, to have real life. So, it is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process, but unless the senses are engaged by the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of a fall. Although the person in full Krishna consciousness may apparently be on the central plane, because of his being Krishna consciousness, he has no attachment to sensual activities. The Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable, and if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. Therefore, to act or to not to act is within his control, because he acts only under the direction of Krishna and the spiritual master, the representative of Krishna. Right? This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. So, once again, that last line saying that, a lot of times people will accept people into a church or a mosque, and only if they have a very high moral standard. But the relationship, coming to chanting, doesn't require anything other than chanting. It's not like, okay, you got to be a vegetarian, you got to be like, abstinent or devoted only to your husband or wife, or just not sleeping around just for the hell of it. You got to be not drinking and gambling and all these kinds of things that are regulations in the sadhana bhakti. But you got to be able to immediately start 12 rounds. You got to come to chanting. You got to do the morning offering. Da da da. All these things. No, just to chant Krishna's names. It's like just to hear Krishna's names, you know. In the story of Ajamila, he said his name, Narayan, and that saved him from the. So, what a wonderful part of the Bhagavad Gita, and one that's worth, you know, it's a very deep subject, so of course it's worth contemplating, and I recommend going through the verses, reading the purport, and just contemplating upon it. Things in this material world or in your own life. And we will stop there for the day. Thank you. Namaste.